Let's bring in Enia Krivine, the Senior Director of the Israel Program and Senior Director of National Security at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and break it all down. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me again, Josh.
Of course. Well, I do want to talk about that video we were just showing with the 50 tunnels that were eliminated, so to speak, over the last week or so. How significant is that? Because I imagine there are way more than 50 tunnels that have been found so far.
That's right. Very few people in this world know exactly how many tunnels exist between Gaza and Egypt. There's probably a couple people on the Gazan side that have the full picture and a few people in Egypt. But what is critical and what this elimination of the 50 tunnels and the IDF's announcement that it's done this, that it's destroyed this infrastructure that allowed Hamas to arm itself and become the fortress and the military compound it essentially has in Gaza, is that it shows how important it is that Israel maintain control of that corridor, the Philadelphi corridor, in any future agreement, so that Hamas is not able to, again, use that strip of land in order to dig tunnels and again resume its smuggling, which allowed it to become the military, an army that it has today.
And when you talk about all of those tunnels that have now been destroyed, again, you are seeing the video on your screen, there were some who said for Israel not to go into Rafah at all. So if that were the case, these tunnels, I guess, never would have been discovered and destroyed, right?
100%. The military operation Rafah was always imperative. And in fact, many argue today that Israel should have started at Rafah and gone north, as opposed to what they did, which is started in the north and gone south towards Rafah, which was the final bastion of Hamas that it finally went into just a couple months back. But of course, hindsight 2020, the important thing is that those tunnels are destroyed and remain destroyed. And Josh, I don't know if you've seen the footage, but some of those tunnels were big enough that a truck could drive through with armaments. I mean, these are not insignificant smuggling routes. These are massive routes by which Hamas brought in rockets, missiles, IEDs, and the other weapons that it has used to terrorize Israel and fight the IDF over the past 10 months inside Gaza.
Yeah, and some of the images showed that the tunnels were actually multi-level, and not only could you drive trucks and cars through them, but also people, it appeared, were living there. There were rooms and things of that nature. So we've had a lot of those images that have come in. One thing I do want to talk a little bit more about is the situation going on right now as we speak over in Doha as the ceasefire hostage release negotiations are underway. Based on what you've seen and your expertise, I know that officials have said that things seem to be off to a good start. Are we any closer to any kind of deal now than we were weeks ago or months ago?
Well, the word out of Doha from U.S. officials is optimistic. They've had constructive conversations. We're going to keep going. But this tends to be the way that Americans message when they're leading negotiations. I have my doubts. Look, this deal that's on the table is essentially the same deal that was proposed in May. And Hamas has walked away from it multiple times. And there are huge gaps between what Israel is ready to concede and on what Hamas is demanding. But here's what's changed since May, and this is what we need to keep our eyes on, is that now Hamas has its patron in Tehran, the Iranian regime, and Hezbollah threatening to attack Israel in a massive assault within hours or days. So now this leverage of a potential attack from the Iranian axis is essentially additional pressure that's being applied to Israel in order to come to some sort of a deal. And it's a very bizarre twist. And I'm not thrilled about the fact that it played out this way. I think that a better approach would have been for the U.S. to demonstrate the force it's demonstrated and tell Iran directly that it needs to pressure Hamas in order to make the concessions on the deal and bring these hostages home. And instead, what's happened is this Iranian axis attack is being leveraged to put pressure on Israel. So it's sort of like a, heads Sinwar wins, tails Israel loses. But I imagine that, as Hamas has multiple times now, Hamas will walk away from this deal, just as they have over a dozen times in the past several months.
As folks are in Israel right now and they are awaiting a possible imminent attack by Iran after the death, of course, of Hamas's leader, the assassination that took place over in Tehran, what is it like being in Israel? Is it pretty much just a waiting game at this point to see what Iran does?
Very much so. And it's been that way for a couple of weeks now. And I got to tell you, Josh, that is the mood in Israel is calm. What keeps Israelis up at night is not war with the Iranian axis. Israel has been preparing for this for years. What keeps Israel up at night is the hostages. And I think it's really critical to understand this to get a glimpse into what's going on in Israel right now. More than anything, Israel wants to bring home the over 100 hostages who have been in Gaza since October of last year. And it has been put in a very difficult position. Sinwar, he is an evil genius. He knew what he was doing when he took over 240 Israeli hostages. He knew that that was the Achilles heel of Israeli society, that there was no coming back for Israel. There was not going to be an end to the war, that Sinwar could drag out this war for months and months and months, as long as he held Israeli men, women, and children. And he has succeeded in that. So Israelis are focused on getting the hostages back. They want the deal to succeed in Doha today, and they are not afraid of the Iranian attack. On the contrary, Israelis are in their comfort zone when they are on the offense. They like to take the war to the enemy. The past 10 months, where Israel has absorbed attacks from 7 fronts, with a very restrained response as it focused its effort on this war in Gaza in order to return its civilians, has been, putting Israel way outside of its comfort zone. So again, the focus is and should be on bringing the hostages home. And if Iran wants a war, then they will get one.
We also learned that the Palestinian Authority's president, for the first time, I believe in over a decade, is going to be heading over to Gaza, which is obviously a war zone. What are your thoughts overall on that trip from the Palestinian Authority president? Is that something that you would expect to happen?
So I won't hold my breath. Abbas has not been to Gaza since Hamas took it over in a violent coup in 2007. He is old, he is limited capacity. If he does go to Gaza, he's going to have to be under heavy guard, not only from his own Palestinian Authority soldiers and security, but also from Israeli security. So I don't see it happening, although I wouldn't rule it out if Israel is willing to guarantee his safety. I mean, Abbas can't even travel in the West Bank safely. There are places in the West Bank where Abbas is persona non grata. He went to Jenin for the first time in over a decade and a half, just last year. There are multiple areas that his regime, the PA, doesn't have security control of. So the idea of him making it all the way to Gaza seems a little bit unrealistic, but these are unusual times.
They are definitely unusual times. And I do want to talk about the situation before I let you go here that happened last night over in the West Bank. We do know that several Israeli civilians were told by the IDF, some of them wearing masks, actually went in to this area and they were setting fire to cars and to buildings. We know one Palestinian was killed as a result. Have we seen things like this happen in that area in the past? And is it likely that more situations like this will unfold as well?
Yeah, so sadly, the fringe of the right wing, the ultra nationalists, a lot of them live in the West Bank, have been recently carrying out these attacks on Palestinian communities. They are widely condemned in Israel. The majority of Israelis abhor this type of violence. And it's really a shame. And I think Israel is dealing with it appropriately. There is a special task force in the Israeli law enforcement to deal with it. And unfortunately, it's something that we just see on the fringe of Israeli society. However, I would also caution that a lot of reporting on this phenomenon has been one-sided, used bad numbers that have been inflated or manipulated. So while it is a bad thing, and I condemn it, as does Israeli society widely, I would also caution our listeners today to make sure that when they're reading up on this issue, that they get the right facts.
That is always a good suggestion there. Make sure that you don't just see something on social media and repost it, retweet it, just assuming that it is real. Get it from a verified source like us here at Live Now from Fox. Enia Krivine, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and break down the latest. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, I think we covered it all. Thanks so much, Josh, for this opportunity.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.